This is Paul Nobles from EatPerform.com. I am sitting here with April Blackford. We're kind of waiting for Spencer Nadolski. Dr. Spencer is actually searching for his wedding ring at the moment frantically, and so he's running a little bit late. So he may make it. He might also have to miss, and that's okay. We've done this many times without Spencer, so you know, it could be like old times. So April, if you want to say hi to everybody, and I think you mentioned that you might have a question to start us off with.
Yes. Hi, everybody. The question was from Lori in the forum. She had just a basic question regarding the fact that she works out at 5:30 a.m. and wanted to know that if it was okay to train fasted and then just have a post-workout meal of faster digesting carbs and protein. It was just a basic question. She had sent me a message and stated that she tries to make the webinars when she can, but she can never get on.
Shoot. There is some bad weather in my area, and I don't know if that's going to affect my internet at all, but April kind of broke up there. April, are you back?
I am back.
Okay.
I think you were kind of breaking up a little bit.
So it might be me. We actually had the broadcast stop last like 2 weeks ago in a similar type of situation. Yeah, for people that work out early in the morning, the basic protocol is to get some level of carbohydrates the night before, and then so you would have like just a starch or something like a sweet potato or rice with your protein that evening and vegetables. You actually might be able to get away with having fewer vegetables. I usually suggest that you can kind of stay away. That way you're sort of allowing that starch to load more effectively. For a lot of people, waking up at 5:30 in the morning and trying to down some food can be difficult. So as long as you have food from the night before, you're probably set up fine. I usually do suggest if somebody drinks caffeine, as an example, that they might want to make sure that they're getting caffeine. One of the things I like, one of the things that we suggest for people is creatine, and in that instance, there's some evidence that creatine and caffeine don't act all that well together. Some people say it's a big deal. Some people say it's barely any deal at all. But it always seems to me like most people say that some level of caffeine pre-workout works great, and that if you were to do creatine in the most optimal way, it would be post-workout. So if, as an example, you're working out at 5:30 in the morning, caffeine beforehand, creatine afterwards, assuming that's something that you're open to, would be a bit of an advantage. And so what are your thoughts on that, April? And I think just following that up with like something like eggs, some kind of meat. I'm not a huge fan of bacon there. I'd rather see some type of lean meat because, once again, we're trying to get a better source of protein within most of these meals. Like bacon, as a general rule, is not a great fat. It's not a great protein. And I know everybody loves bacon because it tastes really good. And I'm not anti-bacon, but it does somewhat bother people when I say this, but I say this often, is that bacon's like a condiment. You want to use it for flavor. You don't necessarily want to use it as a actual food. Now, if you're, as an example, you eat 4,000, 5,000 calories a day, you're an extreme athlete, something of that nature, now all of a sudden bacon's a little bit more in play. But even still, I think you're probably much better off eating kind of maybe fattier cuts of meat, like ribeyes and things of that nature, rather than bacon, just because you can control the source a little bit. What are your thoughts on that, April?
I agree in regards to the bacon. It obviously it's delicious, but it doesn't really give you much for for what you eat, for the amount of calories, the fat, like you said, it doesn't really give you much. I kind of feel the same. I was talking to a member the other day. She eats a lot of sausage, and I told her, I was like, sausage is one of the best things that you can eat. It's so tasty, but it packs a lot of fat and not really a lot of protein with certain types. And she was actually consuming sausage post workout, to the tone of like, I think it was like 45 grams of fat, something like that.
Yeah.
So, I was like, sausages. I kind of consider sausage like bacon. Kind of more of a condiment or like an accessory, whereas you would just have a little bit and then have, a better protein source.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't really eat bacon all that often. More often than not, if I feel like I'm going to eat pork, I will have like pork chops because it's a little bit leaner, more dense protein source. The fact of the matter is that, for myself, I'm 180 pounds. I try to get anywhere from 150 to 180 grams of protein on a daily basis. So if I start the day off with, let's say, 3 eggs, a couple strips of bacon, that only gets me to 30 as an example. And I really need to be at about 50 for those meals. And I don't really, I do supplement protein. I tend to supplement protein more on rest days than I do on workout days, which is counterintuitive to a lot of people because they think that the protein is somehow better and more absorbed because of workouts. That scientifically has proven to be somewhat marginal. That it's the overall amount of protein that matters the most. And so on a workout day, as an example, I might have 2,500 to 3,000 calories. So it gives me a lot more calories for meats. Whereas on a rest day, I might be closer to 2,000 calories on a day like that. And so therefore, you know, it's a little tougher to add in a lot of meats and things of that nature. And so, that extra 30 grams of protein from a supplement does make a difference for me. We do have Spencer.
Hey.
So, but we were just talking, Spencer, about just a morning workout protocol, and we pretty much kind of addressed it. Was there anything, April, that you think we might have missed?
No, no, not really. And I pretty much answered her question, but I told her we would still address it in the webinar anyway. So, like I said, it was pretty basic. She just had the question because normally, I guess she wants to attend the webinars, but with her children's sports schedules, she doesn't have time.
It's usually, one of the confounding types of questions. I think probably, you could block workouts into, early morning, late morning, and then evening, and they all sort of have their own protocol. Like, as an example, if she was to ask the question, we don't have a lot of questions here, so I'll go ahead and kind of address this. But let's say that she were working out at noon, as an example. Well, then the protocol is different. We wouldn't necessarily want to be fasted there. I mean, could you make a case for doing it? I can tell you that I tried it for a long time, and it was just really not good for performance. Because it was always weird, especially if like you wake up at 7:30, 8 o'clock, and then trying to get in some type of meal. But I just had to make it more of a priority to eat around like 9, 10 o'clock. And now, normally I work out in the evening, so it's not an issue one way or the other, and I don't typically eat my first meal till around noon. But Saturdays, as an example, we work out at 10, 11 o'clock, something of that nature. So I always make a point to wake up around 8, eat around 8:30, So then at 10:30, 11 o'clock, I'm sort of ready to go. But it is, my wife kind of makes fun of me because my workouts are very programmed. Like you say to me, you're working out at 5:30. I know exactly when I'm going to eat. I know exactly what I'm going to eat. I know exactly why I'm going to eat it. And that's one of the things that I'm not saying that it's necessary. I'm not saying that it's going to be the end all be all, but I do think that there is some level of thought that ends up working best for people. And it's that routine that sort of allows for comfort. But more than anything, you always hear about people dreading workouts and things of this nature. And I think one of the reasons why people dread workouts, and we're sort of working on this video series with Spencer right now, is because oftentimes they attack fat loss at the same time that they're attacking just starting to work out. And so one of the recommendations I always make for people is that if you're just starting to work out, don't address you know how much you eat. Like, keep your food intake relatively similar. Just address what you eat. Maybe have be more conscious of protein intake. Up your levels of veggies. Less processed foods, starches like sweet potatoes and rice and things of this nature, where you're sort of what we've kind of referred to as eat with a purpose. And for most people, what they find is let's say that they were eating 3,000 calories, and then they start to eat 3,000 calories, but those 3,000 calories are now packed with a whole bunch of nutrients that add a lot to your system. Well, and then you go to the gym, right? So you're feeling a lot better because, your sodium intake is down, your fats are coming from better fat sources, your proteins are better, things of this nature. So you're going to naturally walk into the gym feeling more energetic and ready to take on this massive task of, new workouts that you're tackling, rather than tackling new workouts with a lack of energy, lack of production. And that was actually one of the big things for me when I first started lifting weights, which was my introduction to CrossFit. I was eating roughly 3,000 calories a day at that time, and I put on, through bod pods about 15 pounds of muscle, and that took my body fat from about 20% to about 9%, and with really very little weight loss there. I did end up losing a little bit more weight, but it didn't really prove to be beneficial. When I first started CrossFitting, I ended up CrossFitting at 162. I kind of sat at 155 for a long period of time. That was when I gained that 15 pounds of muscle. When I went from 155 to 149, wasn't a huge benefit, actually. I ended up compromising a little bit of muscle, didn't perform as well. So I sort of got in my own way, and the more I stayed out of my own way, the better things got, And so that was a long-winded way of talking about the different approaches to the way that you would kind of fuel your workouts or eat with a purpose. I know some people take issues with the term fuel your workouts, but I just think, when we start to get into the magic of nutrient timing, we're starting to figure out that it's really not all that magical at all. But what we talk about is what makes you feel the best. Like, what makes you go to the gym? Like, her original question was, what would I do at 5:30 a.m.? Well, waking up at 4 a.m. to choke down some food, as an example, would probably not be optimal going to the gym. And what are your thoughts on that, Spencer? Do you have any ideas related to what makes you feel better about working out?
Early morning, is that what the question was?
Originally, we were talking early morning. We kind of addressed that ad nauseum, and so now we're kind of moving on to.
I
Um,
like just light on the stomach. You're going to have glycogen from your feedings from the past 24 hours or so. So I like a little bit on my stomach. I don't like going on an empty stomach. I like being somewhat in a fed state, but not like not within the right in that hour. Probably about 2 hours. If I had a meal about 2 hours prior, I'd be good. Hour and a half maybe. Hour
so,
starts.
so you may or may not know the answer to this question, but the process of converting um, protein to glucose is referred to as gluconeogenesis.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea as it relates to the timing and things of this nature? And kind of run through, because that's a big topic, obviously, within the paleo community, somewhat within CrossFit. And I think there are positives to it, as an example. I think that it is somewhat true that you don't have to have like these massive carb loads, but you know, I think when you're kind of asking your body to constantly be in gluconeogenesis, you know, it's sort of an unnecessary part of the process. And so
Yeah.
if you can
It's
involve it as little as possible.
Yeah, it's very inefficient, and it is a slower process. So, your body doesn't want to do it. It will if it has to. So that's why, some people do the high fat ketogenic diet, but that's not even that, efficient too. Especially if you're doing these high intensity glycolytic type workouts. So you can use the protein, but it's slow, it's inefficient, your body doesn't want to do it, and it won't, you won't perform as well.
I mean, do you have any thoughts as it relates to Krebs cycle throughout the night, things of this nature? I think you'd probably be a little bit more up on that than maybe
Yeah,
April or I
um,
might.
if you have glycogen stores from the night before. I think you've talked about this in other webinars how some people, if they like to wake up and they like to work out, in a fasted state, at least have that higher carb meal the night before, even though you won't be in that fed state. It will be, 8 hours or so since your last meal. You're going to be burning through that liver glycogen, but at least your muscles should have some of their glycogen. There are different stores of glycogen. You have your liver and you have your muscle, and you should still be not capped off if you just had a good carbohydrate containing meal, but you will have some of your glycogen from the day before.
There
Um,
would be one example, though, I think, that we don't really talk about all that often, um, where you might want to consider some level of intra workout, and
yeah,
that would be if you worked out from say 5:30 a.m. to 8 a.m. You know, at that point you might want to have some drinkable carbohydrate just to kind of keep things rolling. And it's sort of interesting, like on our, um, I've been doing this high volume squat routine recently, and on Wednesdays, I go back to back rest days on Mondays and Tuesdays right now, and that may change soon. Um, and if we don't get a lot of questions, maybe I'll talk a little bit about that, right? But so on Wednesday, I'm eating relatively low carbohydrate, low calorie on Monday and Tuesday, trying to keep my fats low. Kind of like to see the scale get a little bit lower than I normally would, right? Then on Wednesday, I sort of load up throughout the day. I actually, normally if people aren't being too extreme, we would just say have some carbohydrates 2 to 3 hours before. On the Monday and Tuesday, currently, I am being a little extreme. And so I actually start loading carbohydrate a little bit earlier in the day, which usually looks like Chipotle, you know. So I'll have Chipotle around noon. I'll have um, a drinkable carbohydrate, which is about 280 um, uh, calories worth of starches at that point.
Hmm.
And usually lately, I've had to add some caffeine. I like lifting weights with caffeine.
Yeah.
The only
Yeah.
problem is that it's at 6 o'clock at night, and so to get enough caffeine in to where it makes a difference sometimes does affect my sleep.
Yeah.
Not a big deal during the summer because
It
you
was light
know
hungry.
well my kids are at home,
Or say
you
you don't
know.
have to take the children to school.
Yeah, but during the school year it gets difficult and I'm not able to um and I don't always go for like this aggressive strength cycle. Sometimes I will lay back a little bit and so I don't need as much caffeine. um But then, like on Sunday, as an example, I'll come back and that's after a day. Usually, the Saturday before is a big workout. In CrossFit, I mean Saturdays
Mhm.
they tend to put out a pretty hard wad. So then my Sundays, I come back and I do my second squat routine of the week, which is also high volume, and that gets that gets tricky, you know. And so, and it's also kind of interesting because, going into Mondays and Tuesdays, I don't necessarily want to overdo it with food or overdo it with carbohydrates. So I'm
Yeah.
kind of trying to find this magical mix. Whereas on Wednesdays, I can pretty much do whatever I want to do. And because of insulin sensitivity and things of this nature, it's usually not a big deal. As the week goes on, though, and I'm eating relatively um, normal, um, Sundays are tricky. I haven't had that many issues completing the workouts, but they have been harder.
Hmm.
Wednesdays are usually kind of fun because I'm kind of loaded up on food.
Yeah.
Um,
Doing this bodybuilding thing, you get pretty depleted throughout the week, and then you have the refeed, and I mean, I can tell my workouts are just that much better. I feel better, filled up. I can feel my muscles are full, um, and I just
Talking
perform.
about when you're refeeding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, how long has your prep cycle been?
21 weeks so far.
Yeah, that's long-ish, right? I mean,
Yeah,
um, and
really.
it's probably because it's your first one.
It's long because that's the way my coach is doing it. Some people do it quicker. You lose more muscle if you're in a more a bigger deficit. So I'm in the lowest deficit as possible, which
I
is kind
certainly
of
I think the gradual approach is better with
which is
those.
kind of what we talk about on our videos and stuff like that. Is if you do it in a flexible manner. You don't feel like you're in a diet at first. Now I feel like I am one because I'm at the point where it's like, I'm going to a whatever sub whatever percent body fat. But there was a point to when I started off to where it's like, I don't feel like I'm on a diet and I'm slowly losing weight. It's just exactly what we talk about. So, um,
Now, would there be an argument at all, or maybe this is what you do, um, of kind of going higher calorie on your workout days and then lower on your rest days, or how does that play in for you?
you can do that. Mine's pretty precise and basically it's the same every day except for the one refeed. But you could do that. That's what a lot of people do, the calorie or carb cycle and things like that. I keep it pretty much the same. And that would be going more towards the nutrient timing around your workouts and trying to really maximize the performance in your workouts. So yeah, but I work out basically like every day now, so it's I have one.
Yeah. And how long, I mean, the one thing, because you're posting a lot of pictures and videos and things of this nature, and we've put a couple of those on each perform. But the one thing that is striking to me, and I kind of remember this with Julia Ladusky, and I'll talk a little bit about her situation because it does compare to your situation now. Um, when she first started off, and she actually used to do these webinars with me, um, and she just went to more of a bodybuilding focus, and it was just different than what we talk about on a regular basis. But she had a longer cycle initially, similar to yours, and then now her cycles are only 7 to 10 weeks, and so I'm assuming that that's um, what you would hope to do if you ever did one of these again. Is
Yeah,
that correct?
if I ever did it again, yeah, the reason is generally because if you stay at a certain body fat percentage, and if you stay there year round, it shouldn't take that much to just drop a little bit off.
Yeah.
It just depends on what you got. Like, I don't plan on going as heavy as I was before. I want to stay lower because I do want to do some of these, high intensity type workouts and see how much, I can maximize my volume while staying at a lower weight. But yeah, generally, if you're going in a shorter amount of time to cut that weight, it's because your body fat level is lower. You don't have to go as far.
Well, and then the one thing that I see in your situation that actually troubles me a lot when talking to other people, I think your situation is unique. Julia's situation was unique. Like Julia, as an example, and I only mention Julia because most people with ETP Perform are very familiar with her. But she spent 18, 20, 25 years, as a power lifter, as where as she was able to build up all this muscle. That's one of the things that's really apparent in your situation is that
Right.
you're bringing a lot of muscle to the party, right?
Yeah.
What I see a lot is guys getting into bodybuilding, right? They're 19 years old, they'll go from like say 200 pounds to 165, and I mean, and I'm not saying that aesthetically that's probably really good beach muscles as an examples, but I don't know that that's really setting them up for what they really should be focused on at that point in their life. Really, I mean, when you cut down, you're going to be right at 200 pounds.
I'll be I'm about 211, 212 right now. I'll probably end up around 208 or so. I honestly, for the past 2 weeks, I've been kind of stuck at this weight, and I can't imagine getting down to 200s. It's only 4 weeks away, so it's probably going to be around 208. I'm not going
But
to lose
my point being is that if you're say 5-6%, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's really 12% or 12 pounds of fat, and so therefore you have 200 pounds of muscle.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say that you're a younger guy, right? You're 19, 20 years old,
Yeah.
and you were 200 pounds, and you became 165 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, you might be 5-6%, but you only have 150 pounds of muscle. That's 50. That's the difference between, I mean, I always like to use myself as an example because I think that that's the safest spot to be in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you personally that when I was 149 pounds, I didn't like it. I felt like I was like a teenager. I felt small. I mean, I'm not like shredded, at 180 pounds. And my weight, I'm probably gonna end up, who knows? Maybe I'll end up staying 175, 170, something there where I'd be like 12%. I think that's fine. I actually think up to 20% is fine. I think the good majority of people walking around, You know, I mean, I was at the mall yesterday, and all these people that are so critical of themselves, you know, these CrossFit guys that are walking around the gyms at 18% and things of this nature and all upset about it, or even like 23%. The good majority of people are not 23%. You know, they're like 35, 40%. You know, 23% is pretty healthy. You know, I'm not saying that you wouldn't work towards getting better. I'm just saying that you don't have to be overly worried, you know, from a health perspective, you know, unless, of course, there was some kind of medical condition that you'd have to worry about. I mean, we haven't really allowed April to have any conversations, but don't you think that that's a big part, April? Because we have a lot of gals, as an example, that are, you know, 30%, right? And so they see that number for the first time. It's a bit of a shocker, and so they start to maybe not consciously, but at least subconsciously, they start making major changes. When in reality, 30% for a female is very healthy. You know,
I,
I mean, if
I
you're,
completely agree. I think the
yeah,
focus gets moved from performance. I wanna have more energy for my workouts to getting that number down, and focusing on the number. And a lot of times I tell them, I'm like, why do you let this number, change you? Because before you were happy with your body and you just wanted to back squat 250 pounds. Now that you know the number, you don't care about the back squat number and you just want to get the number down. I think it's just mental a lot of times. And I totally agree with what you're saying. For the normal, person walking on the street, there a lot of people are overweight. Yeah, I went to my daughter's high school a couple of weeks ago to pick my daughter up, and I was just taken back by the high school children that are just very, very big, very big, just unhealthy big, and it's sad, but
in our world, you know, where we're dealing with fit people all the time. I mean, actually, Spencer probably is exposed to a little bit more of a wider spectrum as it relates to health than maybe April and I. But like, you know, at my gym, everybody's healthy. You know, I mean, everybody's in great shape. I mean, most of the guys are working out, shirts off. You know, I mean, and so if you walked in to, or for instance, let's say that you went to a CrossFit competition, you'd think the whole damn world is healthy as can be. You
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
but the reality is that the minute you walk outside of that and you go to a local bar or something of this nature, you start to see a whole different story. And I do think it is important for all of us to sit here, um, you know, with some manner of perspective. I mean, a lot of people think that Eat to Perform is about getting people abs, you know, or getting them to squat, you know, 400 pounds or something of this nature. And in reality, I think that the biggest message that we're able to get to people is some level of moderation, some level of just chill out, you know,
Yeah.
because it's these extremes that really is the problem. What were you
Exactly.
going to say, Spencer?
Well, yeah, I was actually talking to someone recently, a patient of mine that was obsessed with. She was like 20% body fat, she said, and she wanted to get down to 15% body fat. And I was like, why? She just kind of came up with this arbitrary number. And, like you said, don't focus on the number. Let's focus on, some of these other things. It's just a number. So I agree. Don't be so extreme.
Well, there are some interesting points to that. And I will say that I am a data guy, and I do believe that data does matter to people, and it makes a difference. And let me give you one example of what I'm talking about. We deal with a lot of high-level, you know, games athletes, regional athletes, things of this nature. And somebody will often say to me, I'm 12% body fat.
Mhm.
And then I will see them and I will go, you are 20% body fat. Oftentimes, people kind of, you know, I I don't know if it's just they would rather not know, and so therefore getting specific. They'd just rather believe that they're 20%, or they'd rather believe that they're 12% than the 20% that they actually are. You know,
Yeah.
and you say, well, that might not be all that relevant, and it might not be all that relevant for someone that really the overall goal is health. But when you're talking about someone trying to get to an optimal level as it relates to athletic performance, it's really important, because if you know that if somebody's 12%, right,
Mhm.
and you wouldn't want them to go say below 8% because athletically it might compromise them. So you want to
Mhm.
have at least enough fat that allows them to kind of be able to go through some of these longer workouts and things of this nature and have something to draw off of, right? So if he's actually 12%, and let's say that he's 200 pounds, um, well, now all of a sudden you only have 8 pounds to work with, right? So we're either going to try and add some lean mass or we're going to try and go down. But if he's actually 20%, well, now all of a sudden we got to have a bigger strategy. And I do think that that's important for a lot of people. I don't know that that's important necessarily for the average person, but even in the case of the average person, like for instance, where we were talking about with a female that's 30%, okay? And everybody likes to say, well, don't worry about the numbers, don't worry about the scale and things of this nature. Well, if, for instance, a female that was 30% who's been worried about food intake, scale, things of this nature, and they start to do Eat to Perform, what do we see, April? Almost all the time, these people are able to gain 3 to 5 pounds of muscle by just eating what they were supposed to be eating all along, right? So now let's say that it's a 150-pound gal. She's 30%. She doesn't really gain a substantial amount of weight, but she puts on 5 pounds of muscle because she's now, working out stronger, harder, things of this nature, better adaptation. Well, that's roughly 3% body fat. So now she went from 30 to 27% without really affecting. And you say, well, that's an anomaly. That doesn't happen all that often. Not only does it happen all that often, it happens all the time. I mean, we see that from when somebody takes their first bod pod, especially for these people that are mostly under eating, they or maybe like not dialing in their eating, so kind of like what we are talking about in these videos, Spencer, where you're eating 2,500 calories as an example, but they're not the best calories. Your protein's not good. You're eating too much fat, you're not getting enough carbohydrate, or you're eating too much carbohydrate and you're not getting enough fat. So we sort of adjust that. We allow those people to kind of reach their athletic potential over the course of 2-3 months. Those people can affect 3% body fat. Now all of a sudden you go, well, if I was 30% and I'm 27%, all I really need to do is kind of keep heading in this more correct direction, you know. And usually, you do get a little bit of a benefit from being on a bad plan to moving to a good plan. But I would much rather see a female, as an example, working from 27%, or 30% to 27% to 25 to 23, to 20, rather than trying to go from 30 to 20, because I don't see that many people doing that and really sustaining that over time.
I
Yeah, that's
agree. A prime example is we have a member in the forum who posted today. He got a bod pod when he started 27 days ago. He got a bod pod, but he went and got another one today to renew it for the challenge before the cutoff date. And in
Yeah.
27 days, and he's in his lower 20s for body fat percentage, but in 27 days he gained 5 pounds of muscle and lost, I think it was like 1.3 pounds of fat, something like that. And he was asking, should I change anything? This is my results. And we were like, no, don't change anything. If you've gained 5 pounds of muscle in 27 days, that's freaking awesome. Don't
That's,
don't question it. Just keep, working out to your full potential, and it's going to happen.
yeah.
So
Yeah, I think that one of the problems that I see, you know, where whether we're talking about a calorie approach, whether we're talking about a blocks approach, whether we're talking about paleo or whatever it is, right? Well, almost always, because I don't know if they're still calling it if it fits your macros,
Yeah.
or they move to flexible dieting, but in general, most of those people are not bulking. They're mostly looking at deficit eating. I'd say 90%, right? Um, the problem with always doing that is that you're naturally affecting your body chemistry. And so an example and I don't know what he fixed. The argument would be that, well, he's eating more, so therefore his workouts are better. Certainly age plays a big role. Pretty much when somebody is in their early 20s, you could pretty much have them do anything and it's probably going to work. Especially if you're getting a little bit more specific as it relates to protein and as it relates to the maximum amount of calories that they can eat to fuel better performance over time. We are getting one question. It's a pretty easy question to answer. What is BOD-POD? BOD-POD is a body fat analysis. The three methods that we suggest are BOD-POD, DEXA scan, and hydrostatic. The reason being is that caliper, as an example, which is also a very popular method, can vary based on the operator. And in this instance, we're trying to have relative uniformity through worldwide, because when we do a challenge, we need a very objective criteria, and the objective criteria that we use for our challenges is we grade your muscle gains at a multiple of 4, and then fat is equal to 1. And so let's say that you lost 8 pounds of muscle. I'm sorry. Let's say you lost 8 pounds of fat, as an example. That would give you a score of 8. But if you lost 2 pounds of muscle in that scenario, your score would be 0. Because what we're trying to get people focused on is to maintain and potentially gain muscle mass. And so usually what you see is from our winners is that they have either gained 2 to 3 pounds of muscle while potentially losing a little bit of fat, or maintained muscle along the way. I think Jex, as an example, came in second or third. She had a little bit more fat to lose, and so she lost 10 pounds, but in that process she did not lose any muscle, so that ended up working as an advantage for her. But a BOD-POD is basically, you can get them at most universities. You can Google it. I think we have various threads in the forum where people talk about where they've gone to BOD-POD, so you can check that out.
Yeah, I need to find one myself, actually.
Yeah, the problem with you is that as you get closer to like these, closer to 5, as an example, BOD-POD's not as good. And so something like hydrostatic might be a little better approach, or obviously DEXA scan.
Yeah, the DEXA scans around me, the people don't know anything about the body fat percentage part. They all talk about, bone density, which is what they're, made for. But I don't know. I've called so many different hospitals, and I'm like, I just want a DEXA for my body fat. They don't know.
Well, what they call it um, is you can put the DEXA scan machine in BMI mode. And so they don't actually call it body fat mode. At least this was my experience. Um, and so the BMI mode doesn't go through the same uh, extent that the bone density goes through, and
Mm.
so it's usually a little bit cheaper. As an example, one of the clinics, we have a doctor that worked out at my gym, and he's also the clinic director. And so, as you probably know, Spencer, most DEXA scans are extremely expensive.
Yeah, they
You know,
are.
they can run upwards of $100. We were able to get ours at $25
Mm.
um, by just requesting this BMI mode. So that might be you know just say I want to do a DEXA scan. Ideally, I'd just like to do it in BMI mode because I'm more interested in testing my body fat. And sometimes that will click a little message in their head that helps. But
Yeah, these people, they literally look at, they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, so
yeah,
frustrating.
I've trust me, I've called, lots of places locally. I mean, in a way, I wish I always started off at DexaScan because that's considered to be kind of a better standard than BodPod. The thing about BodPod though is that, even though it might not be as good as DexaScan, it's still quite good. For somebody like Spencer, who might be 5-6% at the moment. It might be a little bit more difficult. But if you're kind of normally sitting around 18% as a man, it's gonna nail you pretty close. For a woman, around that 10% mark is where it starts to get a little tricky for them. Um, Anywhere from 10 to 15% can get tricky for a female, but 20% and up, it's a pretty good and relatively accurate measurement. And as long as, I mean, like if I get mine done at the University of Minnesota, and when I get my printout, um, there's literally like 30 of them on there because I've been doing it for 5 years, and so like the technicians are always sort of blown away by how many bipods there have been on there, and I can truthfully say there is really no outliers. There's always like, because what people typically say related to bipod or body fat analysis is that there's like a 2% degree of margin for error. Mine have been kind of, I'm not saying that pretty much whenever I've done it, it has made sense, right? You know, I mean, one of the things that does kind of always throw me off, and I get, because both of you have said this, and I agree with you that like these numbers shouldn't weigh as heavily on you as they do for people, and I have this way of where it just doesn't affect me mentally. Like when I go to a bod pod, as an example, the first number I'm looking at is lean mass. The majority of people are looking at body fat percentage. I just want to know, did I gain any muscle in this process? That's the big focus for me. But one of the things that you often see is if you go to a body fat analysis, if you've lost 10 pounds, you're probably going to lose some body fat. If you gain 10 pounds, you probably gained body fat. I I see people that often will put on, a substantial amount of weight, over a short period of time. So let's say 10 pounds, and they want to believe that that's muscle. And I've seen it too many times. It just doesn't happen like that. And there will often be people that will say, well, I was reading on this forum online, and it says I can gain a pound of muscle a month. Yeah, well, I gained 15 pounds of muscle in 6 months. Okay, and the reason why I did is because I never lifted weights in my whole life. And so my body just reacted acutely to that stressor. Since that point, I was able to gain 4 more pounds of muscle. So I was roughly right at about 20 pounds of muscle for the overall. Since then, 0. And this is like over the course of a couple years, because as an example, over the last year, they would go, well, wouldn't you gain muscle when you're powerlifting? Well, not necessarily, because oftentimes, especially if you're 45 years old, your testosterone's not super high, things of this nature, you're really kind of building more muscle density, maybe training your central nervous system, things of this nature. So unless you're doing like these big volume workout or pump style workouts, you don't really see that added tissue the way that you might, like as an example, when I first started lifting weights. Do you have any counter thoughts to that, Spencer, or anything that you've seen differently?
No, I mean, you kind of hit it on the head. You're training your central nervous system, and if you're not hitting those hypertrophy volume numbers, you won't gain mass. You'll get stronger. You'll make some neural adaptations, but yeah, no, that makes sense.
I mean, what are your thoughts on that, April? Because obviously, I mean, at this point, probably no one's seen more bod pods than you or body fat analysis.
I, I completely agree. The majority of the people that I've seen who have all of our members and the women and men that we've come in contact with, a lot of them CrossFit and they do a little bit of lifting, but once they move their focus more on lifting versus the cardio aspect, they always end up adding tissue and adding muscle. Always. Just kind of moving the focus to, instead of 5 days a week of CrossFit, doing 2 days of strictly lifting and 2 days of CrossFit, type thing. So it's almost always, and even myself, I've seen a lot better progress just, strength, muscle-wise, my muscles look bigger overall just by, increasing the volume on some of my workouts compared to what I was doing. And obviously you have to eat to support that.
Yeah, this is an interesting, and I wanted to post this recently, but didn't think to do so. Let's say that there's a magical number that you're supposed to be at related to, muscle mass, and that's for the most part what we're talking about. We're just trying to get people mostly in the most correct direction, right? So let's say that number is 2750, right? And so the good majority of days I'm eating at 2750, my workouts are going to be better, my muscle maintenance is going to be good, things of this nature, and I can potentially gain some muscle in that scenario. A lot of people think that they have to overeat to gain a lot of muscle. I haven't really seen that. I think it's really more of how you work out that makes a difference. I would argue a little bit differently than what you said, April, because I think age comes into play, right? I think what happens for a lot of our clients is that we're seeing kind of that newbie phase, where they're gaining some muscle. We're sort of teaching them that, lifting will help that muscle gain. Like I mentioned earlier, I haven't really gained a lot of muscle in the last 1.5 to 2 years, but it is going to be interesting this next bod pod, because when I first started CrossFitting, I was 162. Now, I'm at like 178. And so potentially that added mass, could be the thing that sort of helps that adaptation and makes my body kind of move into more of, kind of that anabolic way of being, or maybe I gained a pound or two of muscle, right? But I'm not walking into this bod pod thinking, well, I gained 5 pounds of muscle, I lost 10 pounds, and therefore I'm going to be 12%. That's just not reality. And I think that that's what people think. I kind of want to be the voice of reason for that. But more importantly than any of that is that if your body needs to be at 2750, okay, because people will often say, well, you know, if I up my carbs to 350 and I'm eating 2,200 calories, isn't that going to push me over to storing fat? And I would reverse it and say, even if you did the opposite and you added fat instead, but you're below that 2750, your body's not typically going to be in storage mode. That might not mean that on one day or one occasion or something of this, there might be some outliers. In general, though, your body's not going to be storing fat if you're under eating. That's just a general rule. If you're overeating, you're not necessarily gaining muscle either. It really depends on how you're working out. And you see this in the powerlifting world all the time, where guys are eating energy-dense sources, things of this nature, but their rep schemes are relatively low, and they're kind of banging on their CNS, so they really can't work out 7 days a week with any with the types of workouts that they want to do. One of the great things that I've kind of seen recently, I was listening to a podcast and with Mark Bell, and he was talking about how a lot of powerlifters train right now, and he mentioned that most people are training, most of the high-end powerlifters really only tap into that high-end twice a week, and the rest of the week they're doing mostly bodybuilding because or bodybuilding types of workouts, because there is a muscle size element to lifting heavier weight. And so you're seeing a lot of powerlifters be a lot smarter and also not really kind of getting overweight, because it's really not when you're, I mean, there is definitely evidence that as you have a higher body fat percentage, your body is more prone to storing fat. And so if you're able to stay at a relatively, reasonable body fat percentage, you're kind of putting yourself in a better position to make some gains there. Once again, are we talking about 5 pounds, 10 pounds of muscle in 2 months? That's not reality. If you're coming from an underfed background, or if you haven't lifted weights your whole life, certainly you can see some extreme gains. But we just talked to a lot of 45-year-old women, 40-year-old men, and you start to realize that you don't want those people gaining 10 to 15 pounds because they're kind of digging a big hole for themselves. They don't have a lot of testosterone. Their work capacity is going to be compromised by their level of recovery, and so therefore they don't have the type of upside that a younger athlete might have, and so you have to be a little bit cautious as those people are trying to reach various goals. Spencer, you take any issue with any things I'm saying there?
Not really. I mean, that's kind of what we talk about. The leaner you are, or the heavier you are, that's why we want you to kind of lean down before trying to bulk up first, and vice versa. It's kind of that P ratio, and the heavier you are, though, the more you can lose fat without losing muscle. So that's kind of what you're talking about there.
Well, and a lot of people don't realize that your added fat. So let's say that you're a male and you're 30%, or you're a female and you're 40%. You can actually get a little bit more aggressive. We don't necessarily recommend that you would, but you could get a little bit more aggressive, and your fat actually serves as a layer of protection for your muscle. So when you are able to get a little bit more aggressive, I still argue, and personally I've seen it work for myself. Going from 220 to like I said, to 150, but even kind of staying in that 160 range for really almost 2 years, um, the your body kind of gets to a point where it just wants to stay there, and for you to get it to move, you have to do some things that are a little bit out of the box,
Right.
and so, you know, we've gone a little bit long. We'll end this, but you know, coming out of the powerlifting, where the goal was to lift more weight, I was kind of going with the whole ass moves mass kind of theory, right? And so I got a little bit bigger. Now coming to more CrossFit style training, I've dropped 10 pounds in 10 weeks. Have been able to maintain my workouts, and then people go, well, gosh, Paul, you're 178 pounds, wouldn't you CrossFit better at 170? Well, the problem is that it's already starting to get a little bit harder, at 178, right? So for me to go from 178 to 170, I would have to then go to another level of extreme that is going to compromise my workouts. And so what I would do in this instance, well, first of all, I'm going to bod pod, and I'm going to reevaluate where I'm at, And so, for instance, if I'm at 15% body fat, I was able to put on 2-3 pounds of muscle, lost 10 pounds, I'm at 15%. I'm not going to really worry about that, because 15%, is a good weight for me, or a good body fat percentage for me. Would I like to be at 12? Yes. But if I wanted to get to 12, as an example, what I would probably do is kind of sit at 178 for about 6 months to a year, and then maybe go for about 5 to 7 more pounds after that. But like I said, at some point you have to say, do I want to be a smallish dude, or is 15% acceptable? I don't have any problem taking off my shirt, at the beach. I mean, it's sort of funny because, we work with people. Spencer's example was a great example, where a female talking to you at 18%, she wants to get to 15%, and like, you want to say why? Like, what is the reason there? And I think we all kind of know it a little bit, You sort of get caught up in the numbers of it, and you sort of get caught up in, the details, and so you just want to go lower, 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 and you almost forget that, being at a little bit higher, is going to be able to give you a little bit more energy. Like, for instance, Spencer at a bodybuilding competition at, say, 5-6%, that's not going to really allow him to CrossFit all that well. So if he starts to move to more of a high-intensity type of exercising, he's probably going to want to sit around 8 to 10%. That way he has some energy reserves and things of this nature. And I think that when people are able to objectively look at these numbers and say, do I realistically want to do that? Am I okay with being 15%? I mean, for the longest time it was like obsession, 9%, 8%. That was my ultimate goal. And then once I got there, I was like, this isn't who I wanted to be, And you have to be willing to objectively look at that.
Right.
So, which, by the way, is one of the biggest reasons why, I just diligently tell young people, just build muscle, man. Just allow yourself to become a man. You don't need to be like these 150, 160 pound dudes, posting progress pictures in your little 4-pack. I mean, that that's just not the goal. If you were to get to 180, 185 as an example, allowed yourself to lift more weight, adaptation, things of this nature, you're not going to be unhealthy. And that's what I like to see for a lot of guys. And conversely, I think there's a lot of women that think of, well, my ideal weight that I'd like to be at.
Right.
Well, guess what? The average weight for a female is 155 pounds. The average weight for a CrossFit female, like a CrossFit Games athlete, is like 145 to 150 pounds. I mean,
Yeah.
that's telling. That really should tell people that maybe some of these, thoughts that we've had, are kind of, you know, unrealistic, or maybe the goal should be, more expansion rather than constant restriction. And that's really the you know the goal of what we're talking about. So we only had one question. I sort of went all ranty. Spencer once again looks tired. Um, I didn't let April talk. I mean, April is really, she's an invaluable resource in this instance because she's constantly talking to the majority of the women that are our clients, and I think that that's a valuable part of this discussion. So, anyway, guys, I think we've been able to keep pretty much everyone's interest up to this point, but I think we should just end it right there unless you guys have something that you want to talk about real quick.
Spencer's shaking his head no.
Nope, no.
You guys,
He wants to talk about bed.
Yeah. Sleepy time.
yeah, super. All right, guys. Well, I'll see you guys next Monday, and everybody be on the lookout for a couple videos from Spencer that we're doing that I think you guys are going to be real interested in. Talk to you later. All right, let's try and end this here.